Andy Johnson, the distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for, it's called loss and damage, and we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region. Man
is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
WESN.
One of the interesting things about the current situation we find ourselves in is, to some extent, any sort of clue to the political landscape, the media, and potentially the wider public. They're grasping at, searching for, trying to find some sort of hidden message in the tea leaves. One of the things that the media has pointed to today in one of the articles that you would see in the newspapers this morning is the fact that the Prime Minister is going on an overseas trip to meet with the U.S. Secretary of State. Reportedly, it's merely a one-hour meeting, but to some extent, these kind of meetings are very important. Let's not forget that Stuart Young has been described as a great negotiator by Dr. Keith Rowley. So to some extent, it's kind of hard to pivot away from that. One might question maybe Stuart Young needs a Stuart Young, right? But with that said, the article highlights an interesting question. Who will act as Prime Minister? One of the reporters that was speaking to him asked that question, and he said, well, you'll find out on the 26th, which is today, we'll find out. But it was interesting that that was a point that seemed newsworthy. And to some extent it is, because even here on Talking Point, we highlighted the fact that, well, Colin Burt was acting Prime Minister until he wasn't, until it was Stuart Young. And then that was one of the first clues that actually showed that Stuart Young, would end up in the position where he ended up. So now, I guess, because that precedent was to some extent set, we're assuming that whoever acts as Prime Minister, that'll be something to read into. Ooh. When the reality is it might not. It could be just he might pick someone for the moment, for the while. Doesn't necessarily mean that there's any sort of long-term implications. But at the very least, perhaps it might be a sign, hey, this is someone who I trust to not cause a controversy while I am away trying to do important business, like sometimes might happen, maybe, depending on your point of view in certain things, Auditor General. Now, what's interesting is, of course, while we try to interpret different things, and the reality is half the time, some of the things we interpret were completely unintended and not even necessarily considered by the politicians themselves. One of the things that Stuart Young did say is that the UNC seems to be like a pickup side. Speaking to the fact that it appears that they are not fielding 41 candidates. Now, they have a coalition, so to some extent, you could see why they won't field 41 candidates. That would be awkward if you're competing with your coalition members. The flip side is, and I said this yesterday with Dr. Shea Mohammed, I can't remember if it was off air or on air, but it seems like the UNC, they're just not moving quite fast enough. They had huge streaming numbers, plus, of course, people would have been watching their political rallies on television. So they had an audience. An audience is not a voter base. You might watch politicians to hear what they have to say. It doesn't mean you're going to vote for them, because most likely the undecided voters will be trying to watch everybody to figure out who they're going to vote for, right? Some might have already settled on they're going to vote for Stuart Young, or they're not going to vote for Stuart Young already. But you still have to figure out who you're going to vote for to some extent, right? So, especially depending on where you are, like say, for example, Tobago. Well, maybe not Tobago. Tobago seems to have its own separate dynamics where Stuart Young, I don't even know to what extent he will be a positive or a negative with regards to the 2 Tobago seats. But what I do think potentially is a negative, and the PNM should be very, very grateful that it is not a bigger negative, because in a different society, it should be a significant negative. It could have been easily horrible public relations that could have been used in a very well-orchestrated, organized way, but it's not, because, you know, public relations in this country generally is not well organized across the board. So it is what it is, right? And the opposition, to some extent, while utilizing this issue as a battle cry, I don't think they're necessarily using it fully in the right way. But ultimately, and I have said this before and I'll say it again, at least one family member of the Paria divers, of course, is a counselor with the UNC and has voiced her vocal support. And I do believe Mr. Boudram, also the survivor, he has also spoken out against the government's response thus far, most recently in a much more significant way, rather than a neutral way or a patient way. And the fact of the matter is, I can't fault them for that. They are unsatisfied with what their government did for them in their most tragic moment of their life. So they're going to go to the alternative. And the opposition easily could have used this with tact. Sometimes politicians across the board could be tactless, but with, with respect, could have used this as a very, very strong anecdotal example of, hey, this is what they could do to some people, right? The Commission of Inquiry, to some extent, did not paint a rosy picture of a well-managed situation where everything that could have been done was done. It's quite the opposite. Rather, there were a lot of questions of why certain things weren't done. That's what we essentially got out of it. Now, in a different society, an issue like this could have built and built in the public conversation and been a dagger in the heart of the PNM. But here's the flip side to that. The flip side to that is, to some extent, the response of the government, I would argue, is in part due to the fact that we are not that society. They're a government that comes from our society, that takes their cues from our society. And a society that could have pushed an issue like that is also a society that would have potentially given a framework that would have caused the government to respond separately. Of course, now I'm getting into a chicken and egg situation. But it's, to some extent, the government is probably going to take some licks on this. And it's something that it's an unforced error in my opinion, so whatever consequences they have to bear it, right? It would have been easier to not have the result be quite that bad. Not saying that they could have solved it to everyone's satisfaction. Obviously, the victims' families will probably, you can't replace their loved ones, right? So how much could you really do for them? How far could you go? The unfortunate situation is they kind of picked the option that potentially made them look not just bad, but potentially the worst that you could possibly be, right? It depends on your perception on the issue. But ultimately, one of the reasons why such decisions are made in TNT by politicians is because we are a society, we are hypocritical at times, schizophrenic at times. And then we like to stand on a moral platform, but we don't always put our money where our mouth is. And then we want to wonder why our politicians act the way they do. Well, it's in part because of us. They take cues from us. And to some extent, across the board, they get away with whatever we let them get away with, right? And it's human psychology. We have trained our politicians to act a certain way. If we don't like it, we need to change. So while I understand why this UNC counselor and widow is going with the alternative because it's a very real situation to her, to me, from the outside, in the long run, I'm saying I'm not necessarily potentially having a lot of confidence that just swapping the party flags is going to be enough, but rather a stronger message on the type of response we want to see, the improvement in professionalism and service delivery that we want to see. It's not limited to one side, but rather it's who could step up to the plate and show us something new faster than the other side, faster than the other guy, or all the other parties. Who's going to differentiate themselves from the pack in that way? Maybe the UNC will. Haven't necessarily shown us enough, in my opinion, to be confident that they will. But they're not the incumbent, so to some extent, it's not all on them to do so. That's just the dynamics of the situation we find ourselves in. Meanwhile, there's an SOE. The police commissioner acting is hoping that things won't go back to the way they were before the SOE. I don't necessarily have a lot of confidence in that because the SOE did provide certain specific tools that will go away. This goes back to the legislative fixes needed for the criminal justice system, amongst other things. Amongst other things. And at the end of the day, when you look at a macro system, once you have weakness in one area, it's easy for that weakness to translate or to cause deficiencies in other areas. It's hard to tell police officers, hey, you all need to be on your P's and Q's at all times, when they're looking around other parts of the criminal justice system and saying, hey, but the rest of them not pulling their weight, so why you all have all these demands on us? Ironically, not too dissimilar to how some civilians will complain to the police, well, so-and-so getting away with this, why are you on me for this infraction? Why are you not dealing with them? Well, to some extent, you have to start somewhere. But in this case, while the police executive could start with the police officers, parliamentarians could start with the legislature to fix some of the laws, to tighten them up, to deal with the deficiencies and the loopholes and the things that are not even considered by the law that will allow certain acts to slip through the cracks. But, I mean, we've reached the point, I don't necessarily want to get into it. Just reading the basic story and the headline and reading a little bit. Some women decided they didn't like how a 21-year-old young lady was getting too close to the men in their life, so they threw acid at her face. These are things that we never necessarily used to see in TNT. You know, back in the day, it would have been an argument. You know, maybe some hair pulling, some slapping, some nail scratching. Now we full out acid in face. You know, potentially long-term scarring. And, you know, it's one thing to injure someone on their body and to leave scars. It's another thing to leave scarring on someone's face. I would imagine the young lady's face is not going to necessarily, maybe it will. I don't know the strength of the acid involved or the extent of injuries. But I fear she will have long-term scarring on her face. That's a higher level of physical assault and consequence that for something like this, how long will we wait for the violence to escalate? Meanwhile, just wanted to point out, I was speaking to Mr. Ricardo Meade from AM Prime's Wild Wednesdays on his way out and my way in. We were crossing paths. He was educating me on the ecotourism aspect of birdwatching and how it's still alive and well. I thought it wasn't. I'm happy to hear that aspect of our tourism product potentially can not just, well, it's not just in a decent place. It could grow. It has potential for the entire country. But just to kind of leave this opening segment on a happy note is, I just happened to then open randomly a beautiful letter to the editor in today's Newsday. The title is Happiness is Tobago. The writer goes on to describe, you know, the amount of joy visiting Tobago gave her, all the different sites and activities that she was able to participate in, not just going to the beach and going back to her guest house or her apartment or whatever, but all of the various tours, waterfalls, bird watching sites, nature sites, etc., etc. We as a country are blessed in so many ways. The blessings are not just the oil and gas in the ground. Our unique location, the dynamics of our ecosystem. Tobago is a beautiful island that potentially has many advantages over its Caribbean neighbors, advantages that we don't take or make use of with regards to our tourism product. Now, we've built the airport. It is expensive. It's probably going to be underutilized at least for a year or two or maybe longer. But in the long run, we have this asset and we need to diversify. And at least, while there's a lot of room for both tourism in Trinidad and Tobago to grow, at least with Tobago, it is a self-contained situation that perhaps we might be able to aggressively pursue without necessarily costing us too much with regards to having to cut in other areas. That could help both create jobs, generate foreign exchange, and help boost our economy, and provide potential dividends down the line in other areas, including Trinidad tourism, business tourism, etc., etc. Now might be the time, because people could see what we have, both locally and abroad. There are foreigners who come to our country, who come to Tobago in particular, and they are amazed at everything it has to offer, and we just let it sit there. And I'm not talking about putting concrete all over the place, but rather the fact that we have so much untouched beauty in Tobago, we just need to show it off to the islands, let them come, take their hikes. We don't need to build up a whole set of infrastructure in order to utilize what we have. What could help Tobago could then help the nation of Trinidad and Tobago and help us grow overall. If we're willing to do it, that's the only question. All right, I don't know if we have the good lady here yet. All right, so let's go. We'll hit at least one story. We're going to move on to today's daily review. Okay, so of course, when the good lady comes in, we will address the situation with regards to the Privy Council ruling yesterday. One of the things that I wanted to get to was the old new idea, or the new old idea of a, let me get of the new Ministry of Implementation and Efficiency, except it's supposed to be out of the office of the Prime Minister. So it's one of those weird things. I don't know if it's a similar setup to the Ministry of Communications, which technically is not its own independent ministry anymore. It used to be before the 2020, but now it's not, or rather before the 2020 elections. Now it's not. It's going to come out of the office of the Prime Minister. The idea is not too dissimilar to another situation before it. Stuart Young has announced this. Of course, the most recent example in international news media would be Dodge in America and what Donald Trump is trying to do with Elon Musk. Obviously, we hope it's not going to work out quite like that, but to some extent, the principles of the idea, you know, they're important. They are valid. They have a lot of utility. The question is, how will it be implemented and how effective will it end up being? Because this is not the sort of thing for the faint of heart, right? How far will they go with the implementation? Because it's one thing to say that you want to be efficient with things like your projects, and okay, there might be wastage, not just corruption, but that's the other thing. Situations like this will potentially run into, hey, someone, why is the contract so high? Or does it seem like we're not getting what we're supposed to be getting for the money that we're paying, and we're having additional cost overruns? What's going on? Some of it will be a lack of proficiency. Some of it will be corruption. Some of it will be just par for the course, right? At the end of the day, we can't say that all of these projects will be executed perfectly. The question is, how do you determine which is which? And therein lies the next problem, because with regards to a lack of proficiency or inefficiency in the system, you know, some of those situations might require permanent solutions. That is to say, you're not really working out for the job, you need to go. Or there are too many of you doing a job that requires half or less the amount of people. Some of y'all need to go because the wage bill, and in a lot of institutions, 70% of your cost is labor. And our government is the biggest employer in the country. So think about that for a second, right? Why do we need to employ so many people in government service? Remember, technically, a government's main source of revenue is taxes, because it's supposed to take some money from everybody, a collective pool, in order to pay for things for the collective good. But if the largest employer of a nation is the government, it's kind of hard to tax yourself when you are also responsible for paying the wages. So there's that. Then, of course, there's the whole thing about corruption. And of course, everybody thinks certain politicians are corrupt, and where they were corrupt, what project was corrupt, what project was kickbacks, where they getting money for that car, where they getting money for that house, where they get money for that suit and tie. At some point, if you really want to deal with things like efficiency, you're going to run into these situations. And this is the trick. To some extent, you're going to run into potentially your own situations. The opposition don't have projects. The opposition party will have projects when they're not in opposition, when you're in opposition. So yes, you might try to go after certain things that you say, hey, there was corruption here and there, but that will be what was. What is already in the process, but what's upcoming, what's new, what you implement yourself, all of these things. Will we see that being tackled? And of course, in what area will it be fair? In what area will it be a political attack? Because when you have some contractors being taken to courts, they want to claim victimization. Maybe sometimes it is, maybe sometimes it isn't. There's a lot of complications with a topic like this, but it's a worthy cause. And that's why I say it's not for the faint of heart, because it might take all your political capital. Obama used all his on Obamacare. And I don't think it was an effective use of his political capital, because it has implementation problems. But he did it. That's the issue that he decided to put the bulk of his effort in, because it had some issues. Politicians who supported him, it wasn't as big of a success as you might think, so it kind of costed him. He didn't have much left in the tank to do another big project like that. Something like this potentially should be the main issue of an administration, because it might take all your political capital, because you're going to have to smooth out a lot of complaints. A lot of complaints with people saying, oh, they're only victimizing the poor people, they want to kick us out of the workforce, they take away my job, woe is me. Well, ideally, the people who will be retrenched or made redundant will be people who are part of the unnecessary bloat. Of course, nothing is perfect. There might be some innocent people to get caught up in the wash. And that's what's going to make it all the more complicated. That's why it's going to be hard. One of many reasons. That's why part of it is, who is going to be doing this job, this function? That's, to some extent, going to be telling as to how serious this initiative is going to be, assuming that, one, the PNM and Stuart Young win the election, and two, they actually do implement this after the election is won, and we see it. Will we? I don't know. I don't know. This might be one of those things where, even if he intends to do it, the enormity of the task might potentially cause him to pump the brakes when it comes time to actually do it. We have to wait and see. I will give all the credit in the world to any politician that successfully pushes something like this in a meaningful and significant way. But I'll believe it when I see it. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll welcome the good lady. Stay tuned to talk about WSN. We'll be right back after this.
Hi, I'm Claudette, radiographer at the radiology departments at the community hospital. We offer high-quality service with state-of-the-art equipment in X-ray, ultrasound, CT, and mammogram. Come, our friendly staff awaits you.
Give us a call at 235-5479.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
Where good private health care is affordable.
Our award-winning show is back, and this season promises to be even more exciting than before. What's Up, Doc isn't just a title. It's a call to action for anyone who wants to improve their health and well-being. Join us on this thrilling ride towards better health on WESN Content Capital.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lips?
That's the business. I'm nothing to do with that.
I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have 2. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No.
Let's go to the last part.
Of course, when we have minor incidents like the Privy Council ruling on a small matter, you know, every now and then you need to call up your neighborhood lawyer just to, you know, find out, hey, you know, what does mean now? You know better than me. And ironically, there's a lawyer that lives in my neighborhood, generally speaking, right? So she graciously decided to join me on the show today. You may know her as the good lady herself. Of course, I'm speaking of Karen Shera. And that small case, well, that's the whole Marcia Caesar's situation that has wider implications. But as much as I might say that, the implications might go even wider than what my statement implies. So to give us the lowdown on this whole situation, because I myself, I'll admit, Karen, I was being caught up in the wake, right? I was like, is this something I don't know because the Court of Appeal is ruling a certain way, and maybe I should refrain from comment because I'm not a lawyer and I don't know nothing. But you have some specific things and that were confirmed to you by this ruling, and let's get into it.
Well, what I would say is this, that and from a general point of view, you recognize the importance of procedure and following procedural rules, whether it is natural justice or right to be heard, following what the procedure has laid down, even though on a substantive issue you may have been successful. And what has troubled me is the fact that in the newspapers, whilst they do mention or devote a paragraph or two to the major issue, and that major issue is whether there was evidence of any conduct on the part of the claimant. The claimant would be Master Air Caesar, which he was capable of falling within the scope of Section 137 of the Constitution. So that would have been a substantive issue, and then coming from that, the whole procedure that was followed, whether it was procedural unfairness in the way that was dealt with by the Judicial Legal Service Commission, and whether the option that the Chief Justice offered her was not really an option, but really amounted to coercion. But the issue that that really has not been ventilated or has been sort of sidelined in favor of a continuous call for the Chief Justice's removal. It's so overpowering that people seem to forget the substantive issue. And on the substantive issue, which involved the then, well, she was a chief magistrate, and she applied, as many did, I think in March, for an appointment to the High Court. From my understanding from other judges, but I can't see that in the details of the facts that were laid down in the Privy Council's decision, he would have mentioned whether she had any party matters. Then, because there was a whole outcry and prisoners were almost rioting because she had been appointed, she was appointed about 2 weeks into her appointment as a High Court judge. And the issue was that she had so many part-heard matters of high significance that she had already started, which part-heard, that's what it means, and that she should have finished them before taking up the appointment at the High Court. And so when the Chief Justice was faced with that, according to the facts set out by the Privy Council, they asked her, well, do you have any matters? And she said, well, I think she said that she had a few small matters, short-term, short-listed,
yeah, she underplayed. She underplayed what she had.
Yeah, but look at because that's the key to everything.
Yes.
She said that she had a few short-listed short matters.
How she underplayed it.
Yes, that is the key, and that is why the Court of Appeal, that's why the Privy Council overturned the Court of Appeal and said that there was sufficient grounds to invoke Section 137.1 of the Constitution for removal of a judge on the grounds of misbehavior or inability. They found it in the last paragraph. If you could put it, paragraph 58 is the last paragraph where they wind up everything. But that major issue was whether her conduct could have risen to the standard of misbehavior and inability to invoke removal of a judge and follow the procedure under Section 137.3. And that has been downplayed because everything flows from that. And they said that it did rise to that. It could have risen to that, and there were sufficient grounds for the commission to find that her conduct could have risen to the standard of misbehavior and inability. And people seem to forget that is it. But as I started by saying, on the procedural issues, they were all determined by the Court of Appeal, sorry, not only Court of Appeal, but by the Privy Council, or highest Court of Appeal, that she was not given the opportunity to be heard to defend her position, because what she did when there was this outcry, the Chief Justice, according to the facts laid out, he asked her to give him a list of all the matters, because clearly she had downplayed the number of matters, and she said that there were matters that were paper committed that could be relisted, and there were short trials, so that there was nothing to stop her. And while other judges other persons who were waiting appointment to the court stepped back to finish all their professional responsibilities, she did not do that. And so when this outcry came, he then had to ask her, well, how many matters did you have? And she gave him a list that was prepared by her clerk that said 23 matters. But still the outcry continued. The main cases, one of them would have been Achille Charles. You remember that. He was in remand for 5 years. His matter started before the then Chief Magistrate as to whether he should stand trial. And because of this whole situation, his matter had to start again, de novo. And he spent another 2 years before the acting Chief Magistrate determined that the police did not have sufficient evidence for him to stand trial for the murder. So that was a bail case where they said that you could get bail in exceptional circumstances effectively for murder. But the point is, he was an example of the many persons affected by her decision. So when he asked her for the list, she gave him a list of 23. Well, because the outcry continued, the acting Chief Magistrate then prepared a list. And you know how many was on that list? 53. 53 matters. So the question was then that if it triggered whether the decision taken by the Commission at its meeting on the 27th of April, that the information before it triggered and met the threshold for disciplinary inquiry was unlawful by reason of procedural unfairness, and of course whether the option of her withdrawing and going back to the High Court was really an option, because the alternative that she was given was you go back to the Chief Magistrate, you finish all your parted matters, and then come back to the High Court when you've completed it, or we'll have to take disciplinary proceedings. That he did not have the authority as the Chief Justice to do that, because the procedures laid down in 137.3. And so the courts did say that it did not amount to, it was an unfair procedural decision taken, and that on those grounds, her resignation could not be seen to be brought about willingly, but by coercion. But the question really amounts to is, was there evidence of any conduct on the part of the claimant which was capable of falling within the scope of Section 137(1) of the Constitution? And at the High Court, at the Court of Appeal, they felt that was not the case. When the Privy Council heard the case, they looked at the meaning of misbehavior, and they looked at the meaning of inability. And they said you have to be very careful when you're looking at it, because according to Section 137, you look at those words, inability and misbehavior, on the basis of protecting judicial officers from protecting their judicial independence and giving them security of tenure. So if you could use any little minor reason to remove a judge, then they do not have that judicial independence, which is so important in a democracy. They also said that another thing that you have to look at when interpreting those words, inability and misbehavior, is to protect the administration of justice and public confidence in administration of justice by enabling judges to be removed from office when they are unable to carry out their functions. They said otherwise, it puts the administration of justice into disrepute. So when you apply the test, that is the test that was applied by the Privy Council. And in conclusion, at paragraph 36, and that is what they're not talking about. You want to read it, paragraph 36?
I
you have
it.
it?
Yeah.
You could read it out.
The whole paragraph?
Okay, let me do it.
Yeah, because you would have taken out the...
Right, I didn't really actually. They looked at it and they said when they looked at the reasons that the board, the commission came to this decision, they said, was it capable of falling within 137(1) as they had interpreted? They said the question was, had she deliberately or recklessly misled the commission and the Chief Justice about a backlog of parted cases during the process leading up to her appointment? That was something which might have affected her capacity to perform her duty. So that's the ability. The public outcry reinforced the grounds for concern about the impact of her conduct on public confidence in the administration of justice. Her behavior in not seeking a deferment of her appointment in order to enable her to complete her parted matters. And the issues raised as her case management ability were also potentially relevant to the question of inability and misbehavior. The fact that the relevant conduct occurred prior to her appointment, which is what the Court of Appeal was trying to say, that it didn't really matter. It said it doesn't matter whether it occurred before she was appointed or not. It said the fact that the conduct occurred prior to her appointment did not take it outside the ambit of 137. So understand very carefully and very clearly that the Privy Council...
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. It's almost as though people want to say, well, procedurally, this is how it is, and we want to ignore the fact that, but look at the result of her actions, of what it caused to the matters, which were not minor things that would have been cleared up in a week, which caused certain matters to have to be restarted. And we're not talking 1 or 2, we're talking 53. We've already said ad nauseum on Talking Point how long the judicial process could take in TNT. So imagine your matter needs to be restarted, right? The impact it would have on you, the public outcry essentially is the direct example of the bad public opinion, of the bad public perception that this could have caused the judiciary to have. And to some extent,
this is being downplayed. This is why
I think you were right. I think when you said it was ignored.
Yes, I went and read the papers, and up to today, one calling for. And this thing about asking the Chief Justice to resign has been going on for a few years. And so,
I just want to highlight the point. It comes to the fact that was the Chief Justice justified in acting at all?
That is it.
Right? Because you could have complaints on how he acted. Right? I think he could have done his job better in this situation.
But clearly he was told
that. But there was a reason for him to act. It is not like the magistrate was fully innocent and victimized for things outside of her control. She started this with an act that victimized 53. Well, the defendants of 53 cases, that assumes that there were only one defendant per case.
And a lack of being transparent. And you have to understand you've been a judge. So that is why I wanted to make the point that while the papers, newspapers, have mentioned it, they mentioned it almost en passant. And the real issue is that is probably why she can't go back in the High Court, because the Privy Council said at the conclusion, paragraph 58, they said, although the board disagrees with the view of the majority of the Court of Appeal that the allegations against the claimant were incapable of falling within the ambit of Section 137, that disagreement does not place in question any aspect of the order under appeal, which is whether they acted unlawfully, whether there was coercion, and whether the procedure laid out in 137.3 was not followed. But they are saying, and they are not putting that issue to the people, the substantive issue, and that is very important, because the court, and you read the case and the case where they retire, and they look at whether she deliberately or recklessly misrepresented the number of cases where she did not defer, tell the judge, and he had to go to the acting chief magistrate to find out it wasn't 20, it wasn't the first what she first said, then it wasn't 23, but it was 53. How could you? So they are looking
she lied more than once. Huh? I only knew that she misled him once. She misled him more than once.
No, she misled him. I think initially that she would have asked about how many matters she would have had, right? And I think she said, I have just some small, short trials.
Yes.
And I have some paper committals, which can be relisted before other magistrates, right? So that's how she, based on that, he relied on her word. And then what happened is when they had the whole bacchanal in the prison, in the holding cell.
Yes, when they were informed that the cases were going to be restarted, the defendants were all justifiably upset. I mean, it's innocent until proven guilty.
Right, but what happened now is when he was faced with that now, he asked her now to give him a list of her matters that were outstanding. And the list was prepared by her secretary, and she gave him 23, but the uproar continued. And the acting chief magistrate gave him the list, and it was 53.
Right.
And the Court of Appeal was overruled, and the Privy Council, and you need to talk about that. No. That is why can she apply to go back to the High Court? She has that hanging over her head.
I would like to now just interject to say it's not as though we're defending the Chief Justice in everything.
I am not. I am not.
We're just pointing out in this specific instance what the underlying real issue is. Because I could see, right, I could see the Chief Justice. He has this public outcry. He has this very well issue where he was misled, right? And to some extent, this is a common occurrence. Do you want us to go through the process and have to make a whole show out of it?
I wouldn't even say that I would even defend him in any way.
No. I'm not saying, but the point is, I could understand to some extent the actions that he took. It's not like it's completely out of left field. It just procedurally was wrong.
That is for sure. That is for sure, because the point you have to take away from what we are saying is that the substantive issue, because if she had won on that matter, and the Court of Privy Council upheld the Court of Appeal, and said that her conduct did not rise in any way to the standard required for misbehavior or inability under Section 137, she definitely could claim reinstatement, damages, and so on. If I haven't seen anything about reinstatement, I haven't seen anything about damages, I'm not sure what exactly position is, but the issue that raised this is that the question is that, the ability meaning you have to protect judges from things. So you're not going to take a rigid interpretation. The fact that they found at the end of the day that her conduct, by effectively, recklessly, or deliberately, as they put it, misleading the Chief Justice, amounted to could satisfy the 137(1) for removal of a judge, says all that you need to know, because how is she going to then cross over that hurdle with that kind of Privy Council decision?
Right, so technically she could get back pay, but to say...
I don't know if she could.
She could,
for what?
Depending, because they haven't necessarily...
They said it amounted to...
You see, they said she could be disciplined under 137,
yeah,
right?
so there was grounds for the commission
But could you then draw the conclusion that she is no longer a judge because of that?
Well, I think that they would have to, then she would have to, because she's had to resign, they say the resignation was unlawful, so then she would have to, I imagine, bring a case for being reinstated.
Right.
And I feel she'd have a lot of problems with that.
Okay, fair enough. But the distinction I want to make is...
Reinstatement means that during that period, because there's two words, there's reinstatement and there's another word that they use in employment law. So if you're reinstated, it means that you would have to be paid damages for the entire period under which you were not acting. And then there's re-engagement.
What is it, back pay or damages?
No, there's damages and then reinstatement, which is the payment salary that you should have gotten had you been acting, and then there's re-engagement, which means that we're not going to look at the years that you didn't act as a
Or you
judge.
might just be allowed to start from now.
Yes, but she'll have problems because you have the Privy
that's
Council.
a good point. That's up in the air. But I think your point where it's very unlikely. We've seen the Court of Appeal technically differed on this point with the Privy Council.
That's a substantive issue.
But it seems unlikely that she could sue for damages given
this
to
ruling.
some extent, given the ruling, right? Maybe she could, because one paper brought up back pay, but as you pointed out, that's not clear, right?
That's not clear.
Because if she's allowed to get back pay, then that opens the door potentially for an argument for damages, which...
Not only that, it then overrules what the Privy Council
said. But they are the highest court, so can you do that? That seems unlikely.
That's
right?
what I think.
And that, in and of itself, if a lower court attempts to push that part of it further, you could take that to the Privy Council again, all over again, and...
So I guess the important point is no one is defending I am not defending the Chief Justice. So understand that, because on the three grounds, the coercion, unlawful procedure, not inconsistent with 137.3, he lost on all those points. But the substantive issue which led to all of this was whether her conduct could amount to the grounds for removal as a judge. They did not agree with the Court of Appeal on that and said it could. So
let's go to the commentary out of this, because what you have is you have one incident which caused two issues. One is the independence of the judiciary, but the other one is essentially public perception and the ability for the judiciary to do its job. And to some extent, it seems as though too many people are favoring one part of it over the other.
Media's reporting is not balanced, because if you were not I mean, this thing has been going on for years, and there's definitely been a concerted effort to have the Chief Justice removed. Now, I am not taking a position now on anything on that. And of course, the Chief Justice under Section 137 can only be removed by the Prime Minister setting up a tribunal or instructing the President to set up a tribunal to look into determine whether they have their conduct or behavior has offended Section 137(1). The tribunal, this happened with a former Chief Justice, and at that point in time he said no, he did not. But if the tribunal, which would be elected from former judges of high standard, I think at least Court of Appeal, if they come to the conclusion that yes, it did amount to that, then the next step is to go to the Privy Council. And that's how it should have gone. And that is not how it went. But the issue is that the way that it's being presented to the public, it looks as though that all the blame is on the Chief Justice. There's a lot of blame on her. And the fact of the matter is that the Privy Council overruled the Court of Appeal on that issue, that they did say there was sufficient grounds in paragraph 58, as I said, that she could have fallen within the provisions of section 137(1) for the removal of a judge. It's different for Chief Justice. You have to get the Prime Minister is the only one who could determine whether a tribunal should be set up. But other judges, as she would be, it is for the Judicial Legal Service Commission to determine that, but they have to follow the procedural rules set out in 137(3), and according to the judgment of the Privy Council and the Court of Appeal on the issue of procedure and right to be heard and coercion, she was successful. On the substantive issue, they said there was grounds for her to be considered to be removed on the grounds of misbehavior and inability.
Now, she herself technically resigned, so to some extent, she has paid some consequence for her part in the matter. The Chief Justice has not cleared. Of course, this ruling points to the coercion and the improper procedure and stuff like that. So now the question is, the media seemingly is focusing on that.
That's what
you're saying, okay, no, we have to acknowledge the fault on the other party as well.
Yeah, balance it.
But with that said, objectively, is there some room to say, look, we should have the tribunal, and okay, whether it clears the Chief Justice or not, we should have the tribunal to go through the exercise.
You can't do that with the Chief Justice. The only person has the authority.
Well, the Prime Minister. Should the Prime Minister
and the Prime Minister has to be satisfied. And if the Prime Minister is not satisfied, when he's not satisfied, you can't listen. That the law is the law is the law. And that is what the Judicial Legal Service Commission Chief Justice, whatever his intentions may have been, it does not matter. What he did, they said from a procedural point of view, natural justice, he had failed. And there's no question about that because he did not follow the constitutional provision. And the same thing goes with a Chief Justice. That is why they cannot touch the Chief Justice unless the Prime Minister, so the new Prime Minister is young. So I don't know if Young could find some ground, but I don't know.
Well, I mean,
don't know.
They're protesting. I mean, I guess it's just kind of funny. You're basically highlighting the same issue that they're protesting against the Chief Justice for is potentially, to some extent, why their protests might not necessarily work out.
But they just want to make him look bad because they want it to be removed. It's clear to me that they want to remove it. And in their anxiety to get it removed, the newspapers, in my respectful opinion, is downplaying the potential wrongful conduct on the part of the Chief Magistrate, which the Court of Appeal was overruled on by the Privy Council. And I don't think the reporting is balanced on that. So that's all I want to say on that. And I think I would like to read, because there's a lot of paragraphs devoted to the meaning of ability, misbehavior, Reese versus Crane. They quote extensive provisions and paragraphs devoted to that one issue. And and to report it in a way in the newspaper as if she won. What did she win? What she didn't win is that the Privy Council overruled the Court of Appeal and said that her conduct could have arisen to the misbehavior and inability as set out in 137(1). That is what they overruled them. Why are you not talking more about that?
So in the long run, is this more or less the matter settled here?
I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know. They're going to keep
Dare I ask what you think should happen?
But I think, I don't really want to...
You don't want to speculate?
No, because I think the thing has become so personalized and so political that I don't want to get myself caught up in that, because whatever I may or may not think, either way...
Are there any indications that this will go further?
Where is it to go? She'll have to start, once she's gotten the declaration, then she'll have to say that she should be reinstated because she did resign. They said resignation was unlawful, but at the same time, did it rise to the standard for her to be removed? And the Privy Council said yes, it did. So I don't know what she's going to do.
So at least it could have.
Well, they said we overruled the Court of Appeal on that matter. And we say they have to be careful because there was no hearing. They themselves might find themselves.
Well, exactly, there was no hearing,
There was no hearing on it. But what they're saying is we've looked at the facts, and having looked at the facts and applied the test of ability and misbehavior, as we understand should be applied in the case of a judge. In this case, Reese versus Creed was relied on heavily. It means that they clearly of the view that it could, had it gone to the right process being adopted, she probably could have been removed. That is a clear indication from the Privy Council on the matter.
All right, we do have a caller calling now, so if we may take a break after, but we'll take Digger Martin now on the line. I assume he wants to speak about this. Good morning, caller, you're on here.
Sure. Good morning to you, Sean, and good morning to the Honorable Ex-Minister of Finance.
Thank you for saying the things that I am not allowed to say by the minister herself, ex-ministers.
Oh, no, well, it's a fact. But I want to engage Karen because I am what you call a cutlass pointer lawyer. Karen, and I hope you don't mind I calling you Karen, listen to this. Why we ended up with this issue with Marcia Cisse, why we ended it up. From my vantage, we ended up because we had a big failure with the JLSC. You had two judges ran from when everything started to explode. Hamil Smith and Humphrey Stallmeyer, as soon as the mark was. For you to offer that person the judgeship, you would have had to do due diligence to assess her and you're offering her, right? You don't just offer somebody a job just like that. You would have said, unless you say, okay, me and you're my next door neighbor and you're looking good, I'm going to give you. But for a serious position like that, you have to have done proper due diligence because the justice system is under severe, what should I say, everybody questioning its ability and its processes. We have some judges taking too long to give judgment, and that is questionable. Just the other day, the Presbyterian Board and the Teaching Service, they came out on the newspaper for judgment 2 years, and the next day, the judge gave it. So what I'm saying, the protocol used for selection and promotion of judges is tantamount to what the Police Service Commission was doing with police service, with police officers. That is my judgment. The other issue is, does the Chief Justice, because he basically leads the DLSC, was he showing his ability to manage that selection process, that human resource selection process? And you add that to the 2017-2018 when the LATT was very vigorous in prosecuting to remove him out of office. They got two external QC, not KC, to give two judgments. He went to court, he won it, and then the former Prime Minister went, what do we say, shopping for a KC Nelson type opinion not to proceed or basically remove him out of office. That is one issue. The second issue I am going to talk about, the current Minister of Housing, who is under attack. And all I'm going to say with that, who tipped him off to go to change his shareholding in the company in the UK? Is that tantamount to interfering, perverting the course of justice and tampering with the investigation? That is all I'm saying. Somebody has to tip him off. Who would have had that information? Go on. Have a nice morning.
Thank you, caller.
Okay, and you just proved my point. You have exonerated the behavior of Marcia Cisse, and appointment of a judiciary is one where the highest ethical standard, honesty and integrity is required. And so whether or not you say that he should have gone and looked up a thing, he also has a right also to rely on her honesty and integrity. And she clearly showed a lack of that. And at the end of the day, whatever you may feel about the Chief Justice, which is a continuum of this constant call for him to step down, do not forget that the Privy Council overruled the Court of Appeal on the issue of whether her conduct, which is set out in 137.1, rose to the level of inability or misbehavior that she could have been made to answer to that and that on the substantive issue, she has not been cleared. You have just really reinforced the point that I was making previously, that this constant obsession with the Chief Justice, but not looking at the conduct of Mas Ayers. I mean, if that is untenable, if you ask me, based on the facts stated, it is untenable that she would misrepresent not once but twice to the Chief Justice, and there's no talk about her conduct. There's no, well, apparently the Privy Council looked at her conduct and found it questionable.
The reason why that's important is the way how it's been framed currently in public discourse, right? The implication then will lead people to think, oh, well, she's innocent.
That's right.
Right, it's literally potentially changing the narrative.
Exactly.
Trust me, as someone who looks at media to some extent academically, it will look as though the narrative is changing and people are not necessarily referencing the public outcry that existed, and rightfully so. And here's the thing.
What started the ball rolling?
What started the ball rolling?
So
people might disagree to the extent, including Karen, of what I will say.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the Chief Justice is at fault for procedural errors. Right? Procedural errors. Think about it. She is at fault for misleading her employer on matters that affected
deliberately or recklessly.
Dozens of people in the judiciary. Now, if we are concerned about people stuck in remand and people not having to wait too long for their cases to be brought to trial, we can't then say, but let's just only focus on the Chief Justice and let's not focus on what this magistrate did. She did so deliberately
or recklessly. That is what the court said. They said it was whether deliberate or recklessly. But you know, how could you go from 23 to 53? And you know where you got the number from? Not from her, from the acting chief magistrate. Then had to give you 53. You can't remember that you have 53 outstanding, and some of them are high profile. Yes, fine forward the Chief Justice, but remember what started this ball roll, and he making this. It's so unbalanced. The reporting, it's so unbalanced. It is continuing a narrative for the Chief Justice to be removed. That is what this is all about.
Here's the thing: if people want the Prime Minister to look into this situation, that's fine. You could protest it all you want,
exactly,
right? To some extent, because I was looking at the people protesting on it, and I'm like, I don't know if are they acting in good faith, bad faith? I don't know. Right. But Karen is right to single out the fact that how the media is framing it.
Absolutely.
That is the issue, because it will then change the perception of how the public looks at this issue.
You know, why don't they talk about what were the facts that made it arise? Because it's stated in the Privy Council decision. They tell you that she first said that she had a short list of matters and paper committed, so it didn't have. She then said it was 23, and then he found out it was 53.
Now, okay.
From the acting chief magistrate. How could you make those kind of mistakes?
Let's roll back. Okay, the Privy Council said recklessly. We don't know if it was deliberate or not.
They said recklessly or deliberately.
Or deliberately. Okay, so they did say, right? Because, I mean, the implication, the man on the street, I won't fault anybody to assume that it was deliberate, but we can't say that for certain. We can't. Fine. Right? At the end of the day, I would argue what she did is worse than what the Chief Justice did.
To me, I agree with that. And I also feel that it is a concerted effort that started years ago to have him removed. And this has started back that whole narrative again. And I think the newspapers need to give an account of what the Privy Council said about her conduct and the number of paragraphs that they devoted to explain what ability and misbehavior arises, and that they overrule the Court of Appeal on that issue. That's what they need to do. And then they can talk about the Chief Justice.
We have another caller, but Karen and I are not defining the Chief Justice
in
all things.
Not
We're just pointing out how it's being, this story is essentially being contextualized publicly. We have a call on the line. I think it's San Fernando on the line. Good morning, caller. You on here?
Good morning, Sean. Good morning, Karen.
Morning.
You know, when I first heard the headline of the judgment, and then I proceeded to go and dig to find what because I like Privy Council, it makes for good reading. I was surprised to read and then to understand what the media was saying, you know. And as Karen rightly said, this is a re-emergence of the vendetta against the Chief Justice. They have been trying to remove Mr. Archie since that would have been what, around 2014, Karen, 2013.
Yeah, but it was many
something.
years. I went to one of the meetings in the Hall of Justice on this. I mean, it's really
since then they've tried to remove Mr. Archie. And when, let me say this, when the appointment, when Mr. Archie, when I read that they were going to meet, they were going to, well, Master Caesar was offered to be a judge, I was upset because I did not think at that time that she should have been appointed. So I felt that it was how I put it, a mistake on the part of the JLS. However, they did it, and as what happened, what transpired, and I don't think I think she I wouldn't say she was what Sean said she would I wouldn't say misled Sean. What it did to me was prove when she misrepresented the numbers. It proved what I was feeling from the beginning, that she didn't rise to the occasion of being a judge. I didn't even think she should have been chief magistrate. To be quite honest, that is my opinion, Karen. You know, my opinion controversial, and I have reasons for saying that. Now, and they keep going after. I don't understand why the media. What is the agenda with the media that they not going into the, because they have the information, you know. But somehow, this is another occasion to try and get at Mr. Archie. One thing I want to say, Karen, quickly, the appointment of Mr. Dan Paul, and when I thought about it, remember what they did is at the swearing-in ceremony for as the minister, they use it in both contexts to swear him in as a senator and a minister at the same time. I want to hear your opinion on that, because I thought they would have done it beforehand, and then when they had the swearing in as a minister, we didn't know the cabinet, we didn't know, but that probably happened the earlier in the morning or whatever it was. I want to get your opinion on whether or not that situation, because I would really like us to hear a legal opinion on that situation.
I think
just for context.
I think Martin Daly raised it, and he, I have not, you know, I don't like to comment on a matter which I have not studied in sufficient detail, because I don't want to be unfair to anyone. But in my opinion on the matter, that is. But I do know that Martin Daly in the Sunday Express on the opinion did raise the issue of whether, or the validity of the appointment, whether the appointment as a senator. But to be very fair, very honest, I think I had enough on my plate the last week or so that I didn't give it that attention. But I promise that if I have the opportunity next week when I'm on, that I will look at it in more detail and hopefully answer your question.
And one other quick point, Karen. I can't know other place to ask it, or I'll probably ask you on our next program. Where the book in that book in the bookstore?
Which book is that? Probate.
But did you an author?
I've done 3 textbooks which are used in the Caribbean: non-contested probate practice and in the English-speaking Caribbean. I have a second edition of it, and it's used at all the law schools through the region and by practitioners. So that's the one that's the most popular, I think. Then I did one with Routledge in the UK on family law, focusing on the husband, wife, and cohabitant. That should be available in the specialist bookstores. And I did one years ago on status of the legal profession. So, but they're all used.
I want to put that in my library as well. Because I have,
okay.
No.
The one I'm really proud of, actually 2 I'm proud of. No, well, the reason for the probate being proud of that was because at that time you didn't have the ability to go online and research.
So it was the singular source.
So I have to thank the Council of Legal Education for allowing me to visit each jurisdiction to get it, and it was a lot of procedures. So, and it's also the one that people come up to me, former students, practitioners will always reference that book. So I am proud of that book. But I'm also proud of my other book. More, when I say proud, I don't mean it lacking humility. Please, I don't want you to think that. But the family law book, which I did, because I think we, in our developing our jurisprudence in the Caribbean, the persons who are lecturers at the law school and at the university owe it to the national community, the Caribbean community, to replace our books that we're using from England with books from that reference our laws. I mean, I can assure you there are major differences, and there are lecturers who have done that, but they are in the minority. And it is sad after how many years that we have not reached the point where we can see in every area of teaching at either the law school or the faculty level, which I taught at also, that you can point to a book that covers all the Caribbean jurisdictions.
Thank you. One quick comment, Sean. Karen, if you could just, when you leave, just drop a copy of that judgment to Mr. Khan, please. Have a good day.
Thank you, brother. I just want to point out, one of the things that I like most about Karen's legal scholar career is the fact that she said, well, I have a second edition of a book that I'm very certain you didn't write last year or the year before.
It takes years to write.
Right, but the point is, one of the things that is questioned with regards to our education system is how come there's so many local books that have all of these new editions that you have to get every year, right? Or even foreign books with all these new editions that you have to get every year, right? Whereas here comes Karen, and says, Sherry, you know, she just has a small little legal text used in tertiary institutions.
At least it's about 500 pages.
You know, that is only has a second edition. It makes you wonder, do we really need to change up the wording and put a full stop where there was no full stop and say, new edition?
Yeah,
I don't know.
It takes a lot.
You know?
That all I will say is to write a legal text and cover all the jurisdictions with equal level of detail.
But
takes years to do.
My point is your legal texts are not necessarily a money grab.
Absolutely not.
As is wondered by other situations. Do we have another caller?
Okay, can I mention something now? Sure. Because before we this gas issue with Marco Rubio saying that he supports the Caribbean, he's going to Ghana, he's going to Suriname, not coming to Trinidad, and has made it very clear that, okay, we support Trinidad as an energy sector and a leader in the energy world, but if it means getting gas from Venezuela, that's not on the table. And all I want to say is I hope that this Prime Minister, who was still is Minister of Energy, will not now use this secondary sanction, which is what they're calling it, as an excuse for why he could not deliver on the Dragon field gas. That was off the table a long time. I've spoken about it too many times, so don't use that. Because under Biden, he wasn't renewing it because he said there was not free and fair elections. It's coming to end in October of this year. Shell has not made a final investment decision. It's unlikely they will. And now with Trump back in his saddle, now it is not that was going to happen. It wasn't going to happen, I don't think, at all. Absolutely not.
Right.
I do not think, because the whole thing also with Venezuela and Ghana, with ExxonMobil, it was not happening. And now, do not use a secondary sanction, and you're going to talk to Rubio. And maybe Rubio will listen to you with regard, and this is where you can have Caribbean unity. Listen to them about the Caribbean doctors and nurses, because all the Caribbean islands are affected by that. They all.
You mean with Cuba?
Yes, with Cuba. I could see, but he's Cuban and his parents left under the Batista when Castro took over. So, you know, you're not listening
that's
to
the
someone.
Problem. There's a lot of politics in America, internal politics. And yes. Yeah.
So, but I think he stands a better chance with that, because he's a united position of the Caribbean. When it comes to the gas situation, remember they had the Petro-Caribe and all of them jumped on that bandwagon, except Barbados, and left Trinidad to go with Petro-Caribe. So I don't think, all I'm trying to tell Minister Young, please do not use a secondary sanction to say that's why we don't have gas. It's not the truth. It cannot be the truth, and you had to know that long time. I have been speaking about it too many times for you not to know that I have brought that to the attention of the national community. Whether they pay attention to it or highlight it, that's another thing.
I think the region might have a better chance with trying to entreat with regards to how the United States is sanctioning Cuba than Venezuela. Yes. Because Venezuela has actively acted aggressively to its neighbor.
Absolutely.
And this is one of those things where, listen, I'm not saying Trump is the best thing since sliced bread, but he's basically going to say, what did I say? I was right. Look at what they're doing now, right? You want to tell me to change these things and remove sanctions, and they want to threaten a neighbor?
No, we threaten to have elections. And remember, ExxonMobil is American company, and they're the ones operating
There's
in
private
Guyana.
interests in Guyana, right?
Yeah, so-
There were private interests in Venezuela. And essentially, they nationalized some of those companies, or if not all of them. And the private oil and gas companies basically are looking at that situation as, we don't necessarily trust that, right? That's why they still didn't sign, on the deal, right? For the Dragon gas. They know better. They were burnt once. They don't just want to take it for granted and try again. But they're going to be in Guyana, and they're going to tell the various governments of the world, hey, don't let what happened in Venezuela now happen to the oil fields that are currently in Guyana if Venezuela happens to take them over. You all need to defend this thing, because if the energy prices skyrocket because of the instability, everybody's going to feel it. So there are wider implications here. We are stuck in the middle, and we only have ourselves to blame for the position we find ourselves in.
What I hope, though, because, if you're Trinidadian and Tobagonian, you have the national interest at heart, and you should have it.
Yes.
So I am hoping that whilst Venezuela may not be able to supply us with gas, that might fall through, but we do have Suriname and we do have Guyana.
Yes.
So I am hoping that our problem is a shortfall in natural gas production. They're trying to address it. They're trying to address it with the Manatee, which is the smaller side of that Lauren Manatee gas field, which is in Trinidad waters, and the Coquina, I always mispronounce it, but anyhow.
I think it's
yes,
close.
there are two of them, BP and Shell, with those, but both of them have been severed from the Venezuelan gas fields, so there's no issue in relation to Venezuela in that regard. So I am hoping that the shortfall will be addressed by finding some way that Trinidad and Tobago can either develop relations with Guyana in such a way that, I don't know, with the LNG, which we are leader in, or Suriname.
I do think that one thing that Prime Minister Young could do is try to speak to the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and say, we understand your decisions you're making, and we can't move you from those decisions. Where can you help us to negotiate other deals elsewhere? And it could be exactly, as you said, Guyana and Suriname. It could be that America might say, hey, let's kind of help each other out. We have a thing that we need to do. We want to protect you. Trinidad needs gas from somewhere. We want to keep the region stable. We want to keep the gas supply flowing.
And if you restart a refinery to create for the fuel, you also need the crude oil. And we do not produce, we produce something like 40-something thousand barrels per day, when at the height it was over 144 in 2015 or 2008 or 2009, and kept on falling. But what I'm saying is, maybe there are other avenues in which we can address the shortfall in natural gas and crude oil. Reopening of the refinery is one way to refine the fuel, so that will help with the forex exchange and also create opportunities for us to earn revenue, and for the VAT to be paid in US dollars. I know that that was not the case, but the VAT to be paid in US dollars by the companies, international companies operating here, and that they put into place the transfer pricing, which the former Minister of Finance said was costing us billions of dollars in revenue every year. So we're hoping that they'll find a solution, but I do not think the solution lies with Venezuela at the moment.
I would also like to say that I would hope that communication on these specific issues with how we relate to Venezuela and Guyana, and both the energy and the security issues, I would caution, we need to stop. It seems as though the Keith Rowley administration, they kind of try to hold fast to the view that cooler heads will prevail and everything will work out. And I don't know why, because at the end of the day, one of the partners in this whole scenario, Nicolas Maduro, let's just say he has not been the most reliable partner for anybody outside of himself. Right? True. So, and look, Guyana is part of CARICOM. We have to be careful trying to be seen as wanting to have our cake and eat it too, right? Are we an economic partner with Venezuela, or a Caribbean neighbor and CARICOM neighbor with Guyana? Now, not that you can't have divergent interests and you manage them, but at the end of the day, it's far different to say trying to manage the competing interests, at least right now, between China and the United States. Because we have one side potentially threatening the other side, and it comes a point where, at the very least, stop trying to tell people everything will work out and take these positions that very well could proven to be untrue, including how the SOFA agreement was spoken about, right? I'm not saying that they were necessarily wrong to not try to keep things together, but the perception now is that, hey, this dragon thing's falling apart, and it's falling apart fast, and all the things you told us. I know, but now we're seeing the physical proof, right? The chickens have come home to roost on it, so one could argue it's undeniable now. There's no room to try to patch it up, right? I mean, miracles can happen, and we won't necessarily dislike miracles, you know. We would love miracles, but true. You know, we have to see that to believe it too. I think we have Tunapun on the line. Good morning, caller, you on here? Caller, good morning.
Yes, good morning.
Go ahead, you're on here.
Hello, yes. Good morning to the panel. I just have two quick comments to make with regard to the saga or the call for the impeachment of the Chief Justice. First off, I would like to find out, I've heard you all, and I didn't get that impression, whether the language of the Privy Council in any way suggested malice or recklessness with the action of the Chief Justice. And in this context, I would like to believe that he may have been guided by either the consensus of the Judicial Legal Service Commission or the majority, at least. So that, to my mind, it's just that the Privy Council was saying that he mistakenly persuaded himself that his action was in the best interest of the matter at the time being. The second thing I would like to find out is this. An election is imminent within the next month or so. So why is it people are seeking to have the intervention of the present Prime Minister when obviously whatever actions that ensue from what action he takes would have to be left to whoever forms the present government, be it the same one or another one. And therefore, wouldn't it be prudent to wait until this has played itself out before, embarking on such a proceeding? Thank you.
Yeah, well, to answer your question, the judgment is available on the website, and they do use the word misleading. I'll refer you to paragraph 21.
But with regards to Marcia Ayers Caesar's behavior, but I think he was asking about the Chief Justice. Did the Chief Justice act maliciously?
Well, you see, that's the answer then,
right,
because the answer would be the Commission looked at the facts, and as did the Privy Council. The Privy Council is not going to rely on what the Chief Justice tells them. They looked at the judgment, the original judgment from the High Court. And in fact, they quoted a lot on the facts from the Harris judgment, and they looked at the facts, and they relied on it, and they set them out. And which is why I was able to say what I did say today, is because I looked at what they said and how they came to their conclusion. But what they said is, after looking, as explained above, it's at paragraph 21, the Commission's concern focused on three distinct matters. The first was the claimant's ability to manage a caseload, which was to be put in question. The second, by the accumulation of substantial number of party matters. The second was the conduct during the process leading up to appointment by the High Court, and possibly misleading the Commission by failing to disclose the backlog of party matters. Part two, possibly misleading the Chief Justice by giving him an account of her party matters, which understated the true position. And three, taking up an appointment in circumstances which resulted in a substantial number of party matters being left uncompleted, in contrast to other candidates who had deferred their appointment. And the third matter was the effect of her conduct in leaving cases uncompleted, which would have started again, would have to start again on public confidence in administration of justice. And they answered the question at paragraph 36, which I have said. They looked at all of that and looked at what the Commission would have looked at, and they said that they, considering the present case, the board concludes, which is the Privy Council, in respectful disagreement with the majority of the Court of Appeal, that there was conduct on the part of the claimant which was capable of falling within the scope of Section 137. The claimant deliberately or recklessly misled the Commission, The Privy Council is saying this. If the claimant deliberately or recklessly misled the commission, not negligently, you know, but recklessly, that's a higher standard,
right,
misled the commission and the Chief Justice about a backlog of party matters during the process leading up to appointment, that was something which might affect her capacity to perform the duties of her office. The public outcry reinforced the grounds for concern about the impact of her conduct and public confidence in the administration of justice. Her behavior is in not seeking a deferment of her appointment in order to enable her to complete the party matters, and the issues raised as to her case management ability were also potentially relevant to the question of inability and misbehavior. The fact that the relevant conduct occurred prior to the claimant's appointment did not take it outside the ambit of 137. So you heard it from the Privy Council.
So, right, that's the thing. That is the reasoning behind why Karen is saying, no, you can't say the Chief Justice acted maliciously. In fact, there was reason for him to act. There was justifiable reason for him to act. The thing is, the Privy Council is trying to essentially prevent a bad precedent, right, with regards to judicial independence.
That's true.
But you could equally say that the Chief Justice is trying to address a bad situation that could lead to also a bad precedent with regards to how...
He shouldn't have done what he did.
He should have done how he did it. He should have done it. He should not have done it. And again, it would have set a very bad precedent that would have impacted judicial independence.
That's why this case is so important.
But Marcia Caesar's actions, if allowed to stand, would have set also a bad precedent for magistrates. Oh, I want to be promoted, so I may deliberately or recklessly mislead the Chief Justice and the Judicial and the Legal Commission, and we get what we get.
And not do like others did, defer their appointment until they clear up their backlog.
So we could say both should have behaved differently.
With her behavior.
Right? And in both cases, that's the thing. And this is why her situation is just as bad or worse, because there's also a bad precedent that could have been set here, right? Because in the future, if somebody else did what she did, the Chief Justice, whoever, if it's either Archie or somebody else, can't go and say, well, no, you can't do that, because they'll essentially point, but what about what happened here? It was allowed here, so it could not have been allowed to stand, right? Unfortunately,
and I think
the formal procedure should have been a bit tighter on how you're doing this. More consideration as to how to address it. Because you can't play fast and loose when it comes to things like this.
I think the critical thing that I would like to leave on that issue is I am not saying at all that the Chief Justice and the Commission were not wanting in terms of how they proceeded with the matter.
Yes.
I am not saying that at all. I've said it very clearly. But how the newspapers and media has been reporting this, you would swear that she was innocent of anything wrongdoing, and the person that has to be removed and so on is the Chief Justice. And the reason why it takes on a particular priority is because this has been, in my view, as a lawyer, myself, and attending some of the meetings, a deliberate effort at all costs for the Prime Minister, who's the only one who can remove the Chief Justice under Section 137.3, to have him removed. And this is giving them, you've started it up again. But read the judgment, and if you are going to report the matter in the newspaper, say what the Privy Council had to say about her conduct and her misbehavior and her ability. Talk about that. Quote paragraph 21, quote paragraph 36. Give a balance to what you're doing, because the way you're reporting it is as if she did no wrong, and is that what started the ball rolling. So I don't know what the relief that she can claim, because if she's going to claim now that she should be she gave the resignation was coerced, as the court of the Privy Council determined it was, right? It was not an option, it was coercion, amounted to coercion. If she were to apply to go back to the High Court, based on this judgment, I can't see that happening for her. I really can't.
And with regards to the second question you had, I actually do think yes, mainly because there's nothing to be gained by the current administration that officially will only be around for 4 to 5 weeks to try to rush to do anything about this. There's nothing to be gained. This is something that's going to take time, that's going to need a certain amount of consideration that you can't rush into. So why is he going to start it now? There's an election coming up, and rightfully...
What they want him to do, what they want the administration to do.
With regards to impeaching the Chief Justice.
But this is ridiculous, because that is that's exactly why That is exactly why one of the reasons that the Privy Council said that when they interpret the word ability and misbehavior, they are interpreted in the context of independence of the judiciary from executive overreach. So you are asking the politicians, the executive, after the Privy Council has said that her conduct could amount to misbehavior or inability under Section 137. What is there for the administration of justice, the executive to get involved, embroiled in that? You're just trying to push a narrative. That's all you're trying to push, a narrative. But if the executive got embroiled in that, then it only strengthens the position. That is why the court is very careful, and that's the Privy Council, in interpreting the meaning of ability and misbehavior, because they do not want the politicians, that is the executive arm, to get involved in the judicial independence, which is the cornerstone of our democracy.
So I guess you could say the last thing you want is it's 4 weeks left, they rush into this thing.
Or to even get involved in it.
And right. You don't necessarily want them to get involved in it at all, much less to rush through this matter. And it goes to what I said earlier, Karen. This whole situation actually, to some extent, reinforces why you can't just rush to say, get him out.
Absolutely not.
Right? Because you're kind of half defeating the actual cause that you're supposedly championing.
True.
Right? In this situation.
Which is having transparency and accountability. Give what she did wrong. I will then let us come to the decision.
Am I correct in saying, to some extent, it was the ability as well as what was the other thing?
It's the ability and misbehavior. So they really did not misbehavior.
And to some extent, can you argue that she potentially...
But that's what they were saying.
It was both. It wasn't just one. Because
no, it was both.
It was both, because the ability comes down to the fact of, could you trust her? Could she execute the public confidence in the institution, right?
That's
so it's not just a minor misbehavior thing. Her actions, and that's why I said there was a bad precedent here that needed to be head off at the past here too. Her actions could have directly contributed to public losing trust and confidence in the judicial system.
You could lose trust and confidence in. I honestly, with this determination, unwavering determination for the Chief Justice to be impeached.
I don't know if you should name any names.
No, I'm not going to call. No, I will not. Absolutely not. But it's just no. I would not do that.
Yes, okay.
But I am a member of the not the law association, but I am an attorney at law, and I have attended some of these meetings, and I have heard from a number of persons, whoever they may be, but persons who would be in a position to give an opinion, and it just seemed to me so. It seemed so determined, and not only it just goes against what you say you stand for. I am not defending the Chief Justice. I am not defending him. But what I am saying is, I believe the actions on the members of the legal fraternity is equally questionable, because it seems the level of determination to have him removed. You do not have the power, and the Privy Council now just told you that her behavior, her conduct could amount to inability, and misbehavior could amount under Section 137. So you're not you're forgetting about that part. You're forgetting about that part. And that is the part that I don't like. And that is where you're not getting the balance and the confidence you should have in members of the legal profession. You're talking about the Chief Justice having to step down. Talk about what she did, and talk about what the Privy Council said about her.
Now, I want to thank all the callers and Karen for joining me. I just want to wrap up by saying, again, I myself am not defending Chief Justice. It's not like I have good things to say about him, right? Or he's somebody who I trust 100%. To some extent, it's a black hole to me. I'm not so invested in the legal fraternity to know all of the things about why people like him or dislike him or what have you, right? At the end of the day, and to some extent, I kind of was wary about him because of the rumblings that I heard, but those things are not enough to act on anything, right? And with that said, once I heard of this case from the jump, I recognize the fact that, hey, regardless of what you may or may not think of the Chief Justice, this situation, the facts of the matter that has been presented before us, unfortunately, the person who's claiming to be victimized, she had a hand in what happened, and the real victims are the defendants of those 53 cases, which might be more than 53 defendants.
The accused.
The accused. Let's not forget that. And that is one of the things
that
I have an issue with how this thing is being framed. It hasn't been 100% totally framed that way. I did see one little paragraph on the part in one daily newspaper that did speak to the Privy Council not agreeing totally with Marcia and Caesar. But exactly. Let's not forget, we want to clean up the judiciary and allow accused to have their fair shake in a reasonable time frame. Let's not go backwards on that issue either. But I guess some agendas are convenient and forget about other things when those other things are inconvenient to them. With that said, like I said, thank you, Karen, for joining me once again, going deep into this passionate issue. Passionate, you know. Anyway, folks, this is Talking Upon the WSN, the Content Capital. Shaw Michael Small reminding you to make today a good day, as Mr. Shaw will always say. Remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. Stay safe, and it's nice to be nice, because you never know when you might need that other person to pick you up, and who knows, their reciprocation might just make your day. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN.
My name is Dr. Stephen Carroll, the CEO at Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist, and we are committed to making good private health care affordable.
For all your medical needs, including dental, radiology, laparoscopy, behavioral and mental health, along with many other services, contact us for more information at 235-5479.
Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
The home of Caribbean content is growing, and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. As we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts, our social media pages, or through our 75+ digital billboards across the nation, contact us to learn about our competitive rates via